said, my mom, I keep thinking over and over, I want to slit her throat. I want her to bleed out. I want to smell the blood. I want to feel the blood. I want to feel the life and the blood leaving her body.
But the teen's defense team told the jury he acted in self-defense the day his mother died, and told the jury that Collin Griffith, quote, committed suicide by son.
Valentine's Day, Oklahoma, 2023. A 15-year-old boy picks up the phone and calmly calls 911. He says he's just shot his father. When deputies arrive, they find 51-year-old Charles Robert Griffith dead on the floor and his teenage son, Collin, waiting outside. He tells them it was self-defense. After a full investigation, police agree. The case is closed. Fast forward 19 months, a different state, another quiet neighborhood. Collin calls 911, again, same steady tone, same story. Only this time, it's his mother, Catherine, who's on the ground with a knife wound to her neck. According to Coco News and ABC News, what began as one tragic act of self-defense would soon twist into one of the strangest family cases in recent memory. If you're finding this story meaningful, we'd be grateful if you subscribe. We appreciate your support. Thank you. Auburndale, Florida, a quiet suburban town where mornings usually start with coffee, sprinklers, and the sound of golf carts buzzing down the street. The kind of place where people leave their doors unlocked and say hi to every neighbor. That peaceful illusion shattered on the 8th of September 2024. Just after 9:30 in the morning, 17-year-old Collin Griffith called 911. His voice was steady, almost too steady, as he told the dispatcher his mother had lunged at him with a knife and fallen on it. When deputies from the Polk County Sheriff's Office arrived, they found 39-year-old Collin Griffith lying on the kitchen floor. Collin was waiting outside, his hands stained with blood, his face blank. According to ABC News and Fox 13 Tampa Bay, he repeated the same story. It was an accident. The scene didn't add up. The house was still. No overturned chairs, no signs of struggle. The knife was on the floor next to Catherine. Deputies exchanged uneasy glances. They'd all heard this kind of call before. Because this wasn't the first time Collin had made a call like that. Back in February 2023, Valentine's Day in Lincoln County, Oklahoma, 15-year-old Collin had also called 911 after shooting his father, Charles Robert Griffith. He told investigators his father attacked him and he fired to save himself. KOCO News later reported that police ruled it self-defense and no charges were filed. After that, Collin left Oklahoma. His mother, Catherine, brought him to Florida to live with his grandmother, hoping for a fresh start, new school, new environment, no more chaos. Neighbors described them as quiet, a normal family trying to heal from something horrible, but tragedy followed. On that September morning in 2024, the same story played out again, almost detail for detail. A parent dead, a son claiming he had no choice. Two different states, two eerily similar endings. According to People magazine and KOCO News, deputies noticed how calm Collin was as they led him away. He didn't cry, didn't ask if his mother was alive, didn't say a word, just silence. That day, the small, sleepy street in Auburndale filled with flashing lights and news crews, residents stood outside their homes, stunned. One told Fox 13, "They were a nice family. I never thought we'd see this here." It was the same disbelief that rippled through Oklahoma the year before, the same shock, the same impossible coincidence. 2 calls to 911, 2 parents dead, 1 son at the center of both. And while the town tried to process what had just happened, detectives inside the house were already starting to ask the question that would define the entire case. How many times can someone claim self-defense before the world stops believing them? Before Collin Griffith ever became the focus of national headlines, he was just a quiet kid from Oklahoma. Teachers at his Lincoln County High School described him as polite but withdrawn. He rarely got into trouble, rarely spoke up, and often kept his head down. According to KOCO News, classmates remembered him as the kid who blended in. Nothing about him hinted at what was coming. His parents, Charles and Catherine, were divorced but still connected through Collin. Charles, 51, was a tradesman known locally as tough, proud, and sometimes short-tempered. Neighbors told investigators he could be strict with his son, and that there were occasional shouting matches, though no police reports were filed before the fatal day. Catherine, on the other hand, was a determined single mom who wanted her son to have structure and stability. She loved hard, and by all accounts, she was protective of Collin even when they didn't see eye to eye. By early 2023, Collin was living full-time with his father in rural Lincoln County. Valentine's Day morning changed everything. Deputies later said there had been an argument, the kind that started small and got out of control. According to the Lincoln County Sheriff's Office, Collin told dispatchers his father had come at him and that he'd fired a gun to defend himself. When investigators arrived, they found Charles dead at the scene. Collin was waiting outside, calm and cooperative. The evidence supported his story: the gun, the angle of the shot, and the bruising on his arm. Within weeks, prosecutors ruled it's self-defense. The case was closed, and Collin wasn't charged. But surviving a shooting didn't erase the damage. Catherine brought Collin back to Florida, hoping a new environment would give him peace. She moved him into her mother's house in Auburndale, a quiet, middle-class neighborhood not far from Lakeland. Catherine told friends she just wanted her son to start over. Yet the signs of tension returned. According to My Suncoast News, deputies had visited the home months earlier, after Catherine called for help during an argument. In newly released body cam footage, Catherine sounded frustrated but worried. Collin told deputies, "I don't want to hurt anyone, let alone my mom." The statement, meant to calm the situation, now plays like a grim foreshadowing. Over the next year, the two tried to repair their relationship. Collin was still adjusting to life in Florida, and Catherine was juggling work and parenting a teenager who'd been through trauma most adults never face. By mid-2024, friends said things appeared normal. Catherine was hopeful, even making plans for Collin to get counseling and finish high school. According to Fox 13, Tampa Bay, she believed time could heal what had happened in Oklahoma. Then came the morning of September 8. When Collin called 911 from his grandmother's kitchen, it was like the past had come back to life. Catherine was dead, and her son once again stood in front of police, insisting it wasn't his fault. The circumstances were eerily similar: an argument, a parent, a moment of fear, a single act that couldn't be undone. This time, though, investigators weren't so quick to believe. So far, we've got a small-town tragedy that followed a family across state lines, a mother desperate to help her son, and a teenager who's lived through 2 fatal accidents. And now, police were starting to wonder, were these coincidences or a pattern repeating itself in plain sight?
And the first one that I want to talk about is a murder, a cold-blooded murder of a 39-year-old mother by her 17-year-old son. And it's not just a singular murder, but as we got into the investigation, we found that about a year and a half, maybe a year and 8 months, 9 months earlier, he murdered his father in Oklahoma. So let me tell you about this. It all started on September the 8th, which was this last Sunday, when we got a 911 call from Collin Griffith, who's 17 years of age. And here's what he said. He said he and his mother had a very long fight, and she fell on a knife and killed herself. And she's bleeding from the neck. He didn't say she killed herself, said he's bleeding from the neck. So our 911 operators appropriately were giving them instructions on how to do life-saving techniques. When the deputies arrived, he met the deputies outside, and he was calm, cool, collected, not upset, and he had blood on him. What we found inside was this knife. This knife is 12 inches long, and of the 12 inches, 8 inches of that is the blade. So he's saying that his mother fell on this knife. We started our investigation at that point. The next morning, at the medical examiners and the autopsy, the medical examiner said it is not reasonable or plausible that she died the way that he said she did. Just didn't happen.
The morning of the 8th of September 2024 started quietly in Auburndale, Florida. The sun was already sharp through the kitchen windows when Collin Griffith picked up the phone and dialed 911. His voice didn't waver. "My mom came at me with a knife," he said. "She fell on it." Deputies arrived minutes later. According to the Polk County Sheriff's Office report cited by ABC News, they found 39-year-old Catherine Griffith lying on her back in the kitchen with a knife wound to her neck. She was pronounced dead at the scene. Collin stood outside in the driveway, covered in blood, but uninjured. When asked what happened, he repeated his story word for word. She lunged, she fell, it was an accident. But investigators noticed something strange right away. The house was spotless. No overturned furniture, no broken dishes, no defensive wounds on Collin's hands or arms. It didn't look like a fight. It looked like a staged moment frozen in place. Forensics teams began documenting everything. The knife was found near Catherine's hand, blade pointing away from her. There were small drops of blood in the hallway, but the kitchen floor had a single, concentrated pool. Detectives later told Fox 13 Tampa Bay it looked more like a quick, deliberate wound than a chaotic accident. The medical examiner's report backed that up. According to KOCO News, the stab wound was deep and straight, entering at a downward angle, not the kind of injury that happens by falling. The report stated it would have required force, not momentum. Sheriff Grady Judd made a public statement the same afternoon. His tone was blunt. "This wasn't an accident," he said. "This was intentional." Investigators began to unravel the timeline. Catherine had arrived at the house the night before. The grandmother, who owned the home, was away. Neighbors told deputies they hadn't heard yelling or commotion that morning. The only sound anyone remembered was sirens. The most disturbing detail was how familiar it all felt. Reporters quickly drew the connection: the same teen, another parent dead, another calm call to 911. ABC News noted the eerie pattern in both incidents: a domestic argument, a deadly outcome, and a story of self-defense that didn't quite fit the evidence. When deputies questioned Collin, he stayed calm. My Suncoast later released body cam footage showing him sitting across from investigators, answering every question politely. "I didn't mean to hurt her," he said. "I just tried to stop her." Detectives observed that his affect barely changed throughout the interview. One later told Fox 13 he sounded rehearsed, like he'd said those words before. Then came the twist. There was a no-contact order between Catherine and Collin. According to court documents cited by People magazine, a judge had restricted their contact after a prior argument months earlier. Catherine's visit that morning technically violated that order. Investigators believed she had been trying to reconnect with her son. By the end of the day, Collin was under arrest. The charges: first-degree murder, kidnapping, and violation of a court order. The story was picked up nationwide. Headlines called it "The Boy Who Killed Twice." Some saw it as tragedy repeating itself. Others saw it as manipulation hidden behind composure. Reporters asked the sheriff what he thought. He paused, then said, "Two parents, two deaths, one story that doesn't change." And just like that, Collin's second act, the mirror image of his first, became one of the most debated cases in Florida that year. Stay with us as we peel back the layers of this haunting mystery. Detectives in Polk County, Florida, weren't dealing with an ordinary homicide. From the moment 17-year-old Collin Griffith was taken in, they knew the story already had a prequel. They began by lining up every piece of evidence: the knife, the blood pattern, the autopsy, and the phone records from the morning he called 911. According to the official affidavit, later reviewed by Fox 13 Tampa Bay, the knife had only Catherine's prints on it. If Collin had truly tried to block or grab it, his prints should have been there too. Forensic technicians mapped the wound track and found it went straight downward into her neck. The medical examiner, quoted by KOCO News, testified that a person could not fall in that position, someone had to drive the blade. Investigators compared that to what Collin told them in his taped interview. He said he stepped back, she tripped forward. Then, when they asked him to demonstrate, he raised his arm in a stabbing motion, the same direction shown in the autopsy. Detectives noted the irony in their report. The suspect's reenactment mirrors the medical findings. The Polk County Sheriff's Office began building a timeline. Catherine arrived the night before. There were no witnesses. No neighbors reported shouting. Collin called 911 at 9:43 a.m. The call logs showed 2 outgoing calls from his phone just before that, both unanswered. Investigators never disclosed who he tried to reach. Sheriff Grady Judd's team contacted Lincoln County, Oklahoma, to request the full 2023 self-defense file. According to ABC News, that case looked eerily similar. Father and son alone in a house, an argument, a quick death, a calm emergency call. It was hard not to see the pattern. Detectives pulled text messages from Collin's phone. The night before Catherine's death, she texted him reminders about chores and curfews. Her tone was firm but not threatening. There was no sign of violence or panic. To prosecutors, those texts became proof she wasn't the aggressor. For weeks, investigators reconstructed every detail. Bloodstain analysts used laser mapping to show the direction of the wound. Crime scene technicians compared his clothing with transfer stains from Catherine's body. Each test pointed to the same conclusion: deliberate, not accidental. Still, the defense had an explanation.
So he drives to Polk County, and you'll hear from the neighbors that his car got there on Saturday and did not move. So, meanwhile, Kathy is getting worked up, to say the least, angry. I think one detective may describe her as manic. She starts in the early morning hours of Sunday the 8th making repeated calls to Susan and to Collin, and will beg, plead, yell, cuss, call people names. She calls her mom a fucking moron. She is all over the place, insisting that Collin come back home. But at the same time, she'd say, I reported the car stolen because the car is not in your name, it's in both our names, and you're not allowed to drive that car. But you better get in that car and come right back home. But wait, I took money out of your bank account so you can't even afford to put gas in it, but you better come back home. Get in that car and come back home. I'm going to sell the car. I sold the car. I'm already up in Auburndale. I found a buyer whose aunt lives in that community and who gave me the gate code so I could come into the neighborhood in Auburndale, and I couldn't see the car at Susan's house. You're in big trouble because I already sold that car. She was nowhere near Auburndale. You'll see the Ring video. She was at her home. But she made up this elaborate story about having gone to Auburndale, gotten the gate code from the buyer's aunt, and going in and not seeing the car when the neighbors were like, the car never left.
Attorney Patrick Magaro later told reporters that Collin had lived in fear ever since his father's death. He claimed the teen's calm voice wasn't coldness, but trauma, the result of a child who had learned to shut down under pressure. But the prosecution wasn't buying it. Sheriff Judd summed it up simply during a press conference carried by Fox 13. He's killed his father in Oklahoma and his mother in Florida. That's not trauma, that's pattern. In October 2024, prosecutors filed formal charges: first-degree murder, kidnapping, and violation of a court order. Collin was to be tried as an adult. The sheriff called it one of the most disturbing family cases his office had seen in years. The following months were a blur of hearings, filings, and expert opinions. Reporters from People in Court TV followed every update. Each new document painted the same conflicting picture: a teenager who might be dangerous or might just be broken beyond repair. By the time jury selection began in early 2025, the story had gripped 2 states. Oklahoma deputies testified by video link. Forensic experts flew in from Tallahassee. Every headline asked the same question: was this boy twice a survivor or twice a killer? The courtroom in Bartow, Florida, felt heavy from the start. Every seat was filled with reporters from ABC News, Coco, and People, local residents who wanted to see justice, and law students curious about what they called the double self-defense case. 17-year-old Collin Griffith sat at the defense table wearing a navy suit that looked too big for him. His hair was neatly combed, his face expressionless. The prosecution opened first. Assistant State Attorney Mark Levine stood before the jury and said, "This young man has killed both of his parents." He told the same story twice: self-defense. But the evidence tells a different story. He pointed to a photo of Catherine's kitchen. No signs of struggle, no defensive wounds, just one deadly stab wound in the perfect spot to kill. He paused before delivering the line that made the evening news: lightning doesn't strike twice. The defense attorney, Patrick Magaro, countered with a quieter tone. "You're looking at a kid who's lived through 2 nightmares," he said, his voice steady. "He's been attacked before. He panicked. He froze. He reacted." According to Fox 13 Tampa Bay, the jury listened closely, eyes on Collin the entire time. The prosecution played both 911 calls, one from Oklahoma in 2023, the other from Florida in 2024. The courtroom fell silent. The calls sounded eerily alike: Collin's calm voice, his short replies, no panic. Prosecutors said that calm was unnatural. The defense said it was trauma, a reflex from living through years of fear. Forensic experts took the stand next. The medical examiner explained how the knife wound's angle proved it couldn't have happened from a fall. She demonstrated the motion, showing a downward thrust. Jurors watched closely. Then came a surprise moment. Prosecutors played a clip from Collin's police reenactment when he tried to show how the stabbing occurred. On video, Collin raised his arm and made a downward motion, the exact motion the coroner described. Gasps filled the courtroom. That moment reported by Coco News and People, became the trial's turning point. The defense fought back by calling a trauma specialist. She testified that Collin showed signs of post-traumatic stress from the Oklahoma shooting. She told jurors his flat affect, his calm voice, and his inability to express emotion were all symptoms of trauma, not guilt. Catherine's mother, Collin's grandmother, sat silently through every session. Reporters said she never looked at him, just stared straight ahead. 2 losses, 1 family, no peace left. As the trial went on, both sides leaned into emotion. The prosecution spoke about responsibility. The defense spoke about survival. The jurors had to decide which version of Collin they believed, the scared teenager or the cold manipulator. Closing arguments came after 2 weeks of testimony. Levine told the jury, he didn't fall into tragedy, he created it. Megaro responded, you're looking at a boy who's been fighting to stay alive since the day he picked up that phone in Oklahoma. The courtroom fell silent again as the jury left to deliberate. Hours passed. Reporters waited outside, typing updates for KOCO, Fox, and People. The clock ticked past 5 hours before the jury returned. When the foreperson stood, the room went still. On the charge of first-degree murder, she said, we find the defendant not guilty. Then, not guilty on kidnapping, not guilty on violating the court order. Collin Griffith had been acquitted? He didn't smile. He didn't cry. He just stared forward. As ABC News reported, when the judge told him he was free to go, he nodded once and walked out of the courtroom. Behind him, his grandmother lowered her head and wept quietly. Sheriff Grady Judd later told reporters, we respect the jury's decision, but 2 parents are still dead. That's not justice, that's tragedy. When the verdict was read, the courtroom stayed eerily still. No gasps, no celebration, just the sound of shuffling papers and quiet breathing. After weeks of testimony and months of national attention, the jury's decision stunned almost everyone. 17-year-old Collin Griffith, acquitted of all charges, walked out of that courtroom a free man. Reporters outside caught only a glimpse of him as he left. He didn't speak, didn't look at the cameras, didn't acknowledge the crowd. According to ABC News, he was escorted away by his attorney and a family friend. The moment felt anticlimactic, like the end of a story no one was ready to stop thinking about. Sheriff Grady Judd faced the press that evening. We stand by our investigation, he said firmly. The jury made their decision. But 2 parents are gone. That's not something you just walk away from. Catherine's family didn't hold a public statement. Her mother, the same grandmother who once gave them both a place to stay, stayed silent. As Fox 13 Tampa Bay reported, she'd lost a daughter and a son-in-law, and now, whatever remained of the grandson she once tried to protect. In Oklahoma, word spread quickly. The sheriff's office that handled the first case told Coco News they had no new evidence and still considered the father's shooting justified. They said they had no plans to reopen the file, but admitted that it remains a tragedy no matter what label the courts attach to it. For months after the trial, Collin's name lingered in headlines, podcasts, and discussion threads. Some called him a victim of circumstance, a boy shaped by chaos who lashed out in fear. Others called him something far darker, but even those who believed his innocence agreed on one thing. He was now alone. People magazine published an in-depth piece soon after the verdict titled, Twice Accused, Twice Freed. The author described the haunting symmetry of Collin's story: 2 parents, 2 deaths, 2 claims of self-defense, and the same quiet voice on 2 separate 911 calls. He sounds like someone describing a movie he's already seen. One investigator was quoted as saying, except it's his life. By early 2025, Collin had faded from the public eye. His lawyer said he planned to finish school privately and focus on rebuilding his future. His location remains undisclosed for safety reasons. In the end, there was no big reveal, no confession, no neat answer. Just a verdict that left people arguing over what justice even looks like when every path leads back to loss. If this story leaves you uneasy, that's understandable. It's supposed to. Because at its core, it's not just about guilt or innocence. It's about the cracks in the systems meant to protect people before they break. Coco News called it a case that forces us to look at what happens when trauma goes untreated and cycles of fear repeat. 2 parents gone, 1 son left behind. And a question that no court can ever truly answer: was Collin Griffith defending himself or running out of people left to blame? If you found this story meaningful, please subscribe and share. Your support helps us tell more stories like this, stories that remind us that truth, sometimes, is the hardest verdict to find.